All right, today we are going to do a color landscape practice edit. The first step we need to do is we need to duplicate this layer. So we're going to go over here to background. We're going to right click on it. So you'll notice that the mouse has a left click and a right click. You want to make sure you right click on your mouse. It'll pull up this option here. You're going to click on duplicate layer. We're going to call this our levels layer. Okay, so this is where we're going to be using our image adjustment levels to make some value change edits to this image. We're going to be going in and lightening some areas and also darkening some areas. Okay. All right, so to be able to do that, we need to use our lasso tool. So we're going to go over here and select our lasso tool. So in order to select our lasso tool, you have to right click on it on your mouse, and you need to select your lasso tool. Make sure it's selected. We're going to look at different areas that we want to darken and some areas that we want to lighten. So we're going to start up here on this right hand corner, and we're going to go around the little flower here because we don't want to get that in the, and we're just going to completely draw a circle around that. You're going to get what's called marching ants. We're going to come over here to this refine edge. Now you are going to want to feather anywhere between 80 and 100. So I'm going to start at 80. And the idea is to make sure that this completely feathers out gradually. Okay. So I'm going to say okay, but you can do anywhere between 80 and 100, or whatever works best. You want to see a gradual fading. You don't want to see any precise lines when you go up to levels, image adjustment levels. You're going to want to move this little black triangle over until you get to the top, to the beginning of this little mountain here. And you can see here that just the sky goes a little bit darker. We don't see really much difference, maybe a little bit of difference here in the clouds, but it looks much darker than it was. So we've turned off our layer. You can see the original. If we turn it back on, we can see the nice darkness in the sky here. All right, so we're going to come over here now, and we're going to select this section here, just kind of going around the castle carefully. We're going to go to refine edge, and again we're going to feather this out to like 100 or so. We don't want to go too much into the castle, okay? We don't want to impact that castle too much. So maybe, but at the same time we still have to like gradually feather this. So let's go about 42 or so on that one. We're going to come up here to image adjustment levels, and we're going to move this little black triangle over a little bit carefully as the sky gets a little bit darker. Okay, right about there looks good. So if we turn this on and off, we can see our changes in our blue sky. Okay, off and on. I'm thinking I might make this appear a little more dramatic in the clouds. So I'm going to select that. Again, I want to feather this, but I want it to gradually feather out. And I don't want to get too much of the top of the castle, but this definitely here does gradually feather out. It looks like it's about 35 here. So I'm going to say okay. And then I'm going to go to image adjustment levels. And I'm going to move this over a little bit, just making our clouds just a little bit darker. Not too much though. Maybe right about there. That looks pretty good. Alrighty. Okay, so I have this little area here. I want eventually my blue sky to be pretty much everywhere. Like, I don't like the fact that this kind of gets too light next to the castle. Eventually I'm going to want to like maybe select a little bit of an area here. Okay, and go to refine edges and feather that out a little bit, a little more. I just want to see a nice gradual feathering there. Nice gradual feathering. No harsh lines. I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, Levels, and I'm going to make that just a little bit darker, but not too much, just a tad bit darker there. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing here. Oh, I got a little bit too close to that castle, so I'm going to make sure I'm not too close to that castle. Go to Refine Edge. Again, I'm going to feather this out a little bit, not getting too close to the castle wall, and say OK. Go to Image, Adjustment Levels, and I'm going to move this over a little bit, make that a little bit darker in there. OK. Okay, so if I turn this on and off now, we can see we did a lot of darkening around that sky. Now I want to make the castle here a little bit lighter, so I'm going to select some sections of the castle just on the right side here. Go to Refine Edge, feather this out a little bit. I'm going to maybe go like to 100. Say OK. I don't. It's doing weird things, but I think it's OK in the end. Image Adjustment Levels, and this time when I want to lighten, I have to actually go over here to this little white or gray triangle and move it over to get it lighter. Okay, so now we can see that we just lighten the castle a little bit. You see that? Now I'm going to do this section here in the middle. Refine Edge. I'm going to feather it out. Make sure it blends out nice and gradually. It's thinking, it's thinking. Okay. Yeah, should definitely feather out nicely and gradually. And then say OK. And then Image, Adjustment Levels. And again, I'm going to move this over and just lighten that area a little bit. Okay, not too much, but just a little bit. And now I'm going to do the tower, but I'm not going to go all the way up to the top of the tower. These little uneven section, I'm just going to leave those the way they are. I'm going to go to Refine Edge, and I'm going to feather this out a bit. Maybe to like, so it all gradually feathers out. Looks good. I'm going to say OK. So that was about 50. So you can see that it depends on how big my selection is, like how much I'm going to feather it. It just has to feather gradually. You don't want to have like a line. So when you go up to Image Adjustments Levels, you don't want to see a line. OK. Good. So now I'm going to do this bottom section of the castle, which is part of the walkway area, and just select this whole area here, go to Refine Edge, and I'm going to feather it out. So it kind of gradually feathers out. I don't know, there we go. Okay, that looks like it gradually feathers out, okay. And I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment Levels, and I'm going to lighten it, move this over and lighten this, good. Say OK. All right, so if I turn this on and off now, we can see that the castle is definitely a lot lighter. And later on, I might just kind of dodge the tops of the towers just to make them a little bit lighter, but they're just too small of an area for me to actually use the lasso tool on. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to call this Dodge and Burn. And now I'm just going to go in with my Dodge and Burn tool. I'm going to go over here and use my Dodge tool, which is a tool that makes areas go lighter. I'm going to make my brush pretty small to fit into the little tower area here, so like 34. And I'm going to move my exposure down to about 20%. Okay, so now I'm going to go in and I'm going to dodge this area out by just making the top of the tower where it's uneven, just a little bit lighter. Same thing here. Just a couple clicks. All I'm doing is just clicking my mouse and making this a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter here. So if we turn this on and off, we can see a subtle difference. Like I say, it's subtle. It has to be subtle. You don't want to do anything too dramatic. So I can kind of go back in and do a little more if I want, actually, because it's so subtle. We want a subtle change, just a little bit lighter here. So we can turn the layer on and off, and we can see how it gets a little bit lighter. I'm thinking about making this a little bit lighter here as well, along the side of the wall. So if we turn that on and off, okay. Maybe a little bit lighter here in the where the door is. Okay, so now I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to call it Retouch, because this is where I'm going to do my retouching, okay? All right, so to do retouching, I have to click on my Alt key, and I'm going to take out this shield, and I'm also going to add more blue over here on the left side of the wall. So here we go. So first I have to select my clone tool, which I did. Right click on the mouse, select my clone tool, and I need to make sure my brush is a little bigger. You can use your bracket keys on your keyboard to make your brush smaller and larger, or you can come over here, make sure you have a nice soft brush, and you can resize it here. I want you to size it about the same size as the shield, which is about 40. Click on the Alt and select the wall to the right of the shield. All right, my target was to the right of the shield. Now I'm going to go in and start adding the wall to get rid of that shield. Make sure your opacity is about 50% when you do this, okay? You could do it at 100%, probably be okay, just because this is pretty easy to remove. But when you come over here to do the sky area, you definitely are going to want to put this down. So let's put the sky area at about 50%. What we're going to do is we're going to select this blue over here and move it into this area to the left of the wall. Okay, so we see that we're starting to fill this blue in. Okay, we gotta be really careful when you get to the edge of the wall. What I want you to do is I want you to zoom in. Okay, how do I zoom in? I want you to do Control+. And then you're gonna move over so that you have an up-close version of this, okay? Now, as you start to clone this area, I want you to really pay attention to the edge of the wall. You don't want to put any blue in the wall, okay? I'm thinking about taking some of this and moving this over here to get a little bit of the texture of the cloud. Okay, so we can see we added a little bit of texture from over here to this area here. You'll notice I keep changing my brush size. Yes, because sometimes I need a bigger brush or sometimes I need a smaller brush, so be aware of that. Okay, you can see I'm filling it in more. I'm going to zoom in really close now and just look at that and make sure I like the way it looks. I might want to change it a tad bit. It just keeps cloning the area that I have on this side of the image because I'm cloning in these kind of these texture here of the clouds over here on the left. I'm also cloning in a little bit of the white cloud just to kind of fill it in and make it look natural. This is probably going to be the most difficult part of working on this image because you have to work with various value tones and you have to try to make it look natural. Okay, so now we're going to tackle this section down here. I'm going to use some of this section here of this cloud to fill in over here. Alright, you can see that I'm kind of taking from different sections. I keep using the cloning tool over and over again. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer here. Control plus is what I need to zoom in. I'm just going to look at this. So I don't like the fact that there's a little bit of white between this section, or a little bit of light blue between this section and the wall. So I want to get rid of that. So I'm going to go in with a much smaller brush using my bracket tool and fill in this section a little more. I'm actually going to take it from here because I want to match the same tones here along the wall. Okay, now I'm going to back out. That looks pretty good. I think I might want to put a little bit of texture in on the clouds, along the edge of the clouds here. So I'm going to grab some texture. Okay, I think that looks a little more natural. Okay, so now we're going to back out and look at this whole thing. It looks a little more natural here. I might add maybe a tad bit more white clouds in here, a little bit right there. Okay, I'm going to back up. Okay. All Alrighty, so now we need to add in a hue and saturation layer. So you want to come right down here to this little circle. Half of it is white and half of it is gray. You're going to click on this adjustment layer and you're going to click on hue saturation, and we are going to move this over a little bit so we can see what we're doing. We're going to add some saturation here, make the colors pop a little bit, and that's good. So we added about plus 35 on that. We're going to add a brightness and contrast layer. We're going to add a little bit of contrast to this and bring down the no, I like the brightness. I think the brightness is fine. So keep that as 0. And we just wanted to add like a little bit of contrast. So I put it up to like about 620. About 20 is good. So if we turn off these layers, we can see the difference. So there is the hue saturation, brightness and contrast, and now we're going to add a vignette, which is a solid color, black at the bottom. We're going to say, okay, we need to activate our layer mask, but first let's make sure we're on a nice big brush. Probably about 2500. So we can just type in 2500 and just check to see how big that brush is. We're going to click on our layer mask over here. Oop, that's way too big. So maybe we need to make a smaller brush. Maybe about 1000. They've made changes to Photoshop since I started doing this. Okay, so maybe we'll put in like 1000. Let's see if that's good enough. Yeah, I think 1000's good. That'll be good. We want to make sure we're on our layer mask, the little white box to the right of the black. Select that. About 1000 brush size, and then we want to make sure we have black over white. We can reset our little setting here for our foreground and background color by clicking on this little tiny icon, and then on the right side you'll see an arrow. Click on that and make sure the black is over the white, and then we are just going to sweep across this at 50% opacity up here, and we're just going to sweep across this until we have a little bit of black along, a little bit of darker gray tones along the edge of our image. You can see it here on our layer mask, a little bit of gray tones just along the bottom edge, and then everything else in the layer mask should be black. And at this point you're done. So you'll have background, you'll have levels, dodge and burn, and retouch. Now dodge and burn is optional. You may not need to do it, but if you do, then I would definitely duplicate the levels, call that dodge and burn, and then duplicate the dodge and burn and do a retouch.